So I'm going to give you some information that on how we'll be running the sessions and things, and so the presenters should sort of pay attention to this. We have, if you've looked at the program, you know we have a lot of presentations this time. One of the things we've tried to do is to adjust the overall schedule and adjust the conference so that we can stress and have more technical presentations. We have a lot of those, but that means there's a challenge for the presenters. That means you guys need to stay on time. And so to help that, we're going to be using the same thing we've done before. We have a countdown timer. Can you just hold that up? Hold up so people can see. This is the same one we've used before. And so if you're familiar with that, that little guy is a countdown timer. And so the amount of time you have to speak will be displayed there. And then when you start talking, it'll count down. And when it gets to within 3 minutes of your talk being over, it'll send a little announcement saying that. And then when you get within 1 minute, it makes another announcement. And when you don't want to hear the third announcement, I'm just saying. So your objective is to make sure you never hear that. So I'm just giving that to you as a goal. So we will have about an hour for lunch, assuming that everybody stays more or less on time with their talks. And lunchbox will be provided and we'll talk more about that later on. Let's see. And I also want to mention that we are recording all of the presentations. And they're being broadcast live over YouTube. Yes? It's not? Oh ho! Well, it's not being broadcast live on that. But I assume we are recording. Is that true? Makoto, are we recording the sessions? Okay, good. Apparently it's not live now, so that's fine, I guess. So in any event, we will be recording these, and so you'll notice in your little bags of goodies that you got when you checked in, there's a form in there. It's a release form. All the presenters will need to sign that. And if you are someone who does not want to be recorded, you need to let us know that, because we'll turn off the camera for your presentation. So, but again, we want to do that, and these recordings become part of the permanent record. Let's see. And again, the session chairs will be collecting those forms, so before you speak, if you could provide that form to your session chair, that would help. This afternoon, we're going to be doing a tabletop exercise, as you noticed in your program. We'll be doing these things a little differently, and so you'll have an opportunity to select what group you want to be on. So you can pick the one. Last time we did it randomly. This time you can pick the group you want to be on. And we've got a really interesting threat scenario cooked up, and you'll be thanking Dr. Chodas for that later on, I'm sure, or not. So in any event, it should be a little different, and I think you'll enjoy that. Fake news, well, we have somebody there. Victoria's leading the fake news group, so that'll be fine. So in any event, we will give you an opportunity to select a little bit later on and tell you where those will be held. Okay, so now I'm pleased to introduce the chairs of Session 1. And that session is dealing with key international and political developments. So basically what we've done on every conference is start the conference with sort of where we are and where things are actually happening on the planet, so that you can see that we're making progress and where we're making progress. So we have two co-chairs for that one. Romana Kofler is the program officer at the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs in Vienna. Very honored to have Romana. And for one reason is she's supported the activities of the United Nations Action Team 14, which developed recommendations on how space agencies should work together to develop responses to asteroid threats. That's something called SMPAG, and you'll hear about that later on. The Space Mission Planning Advisory Group, of what that stands for. Lindley likes SMPAG. And then the second co-chair is Dr. Hajime Yano. He's assistant professor of the Department of Planetary Science at JAXA's Institute of Space and Astronautical Science. He also serves as at the program office and the research and development office at JAXA's Space Exploration Center. So with that, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill, and welcome everyone. Also on behalf of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. It's a pleasure to be here. I think this is the first time we've been officially invited, so considering also developments in planetary defense, this is really a good sign. I'm going to be speaking just a little bit. I would just like to give you a brief overview of what has been happening within the UN framework and how we actually came to have now the SMPAG and I1 established as two entities that are working internationally on neo-mitigation efforts. As I said, I work for the Office for Outer Space Affairs. This has been around for 50 years, a bit more, with the core vision to promote international cooperation in the peaceful use of outer space. And nearest objects have been a very important part of our work as well, because the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space that we support and currently has 84 member states has that item on the agenda. Recently we have also become the Secretariat to SMPAG Space Mission Plan and Advisory Group. But let me give you just a brief background. This is our structure. We're based in Vienna, and our director is Ms. Simonetta Di Pippo. As I said, the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space considers various subjects that are also relevant and closely connected to planetary defense, such as space weather, we heard before, disaster risk reduction, but also nearest objects. As you all know, building resilient societies is one of the key challenges of the 21st century, and NEOs obviously represent one of the three pillars of this cross-cutting area, space for resiliency. This is also very much connected to the three global development agenda, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, which all have their end goal to build and strengthen, to build resilient societies. Just a brief overview. So the United Nations obviously has been, due to their global character, has been seen as the platform to coordinate also the NEO-related mitigation efforts. There were a couple of conferences held in the 90s that organized by the Office for Outer Space Affairs that tried to sensitize member states about the importance of cooperation in this area. A result of UNISPACE 3 conference, which is the third United Nations Conference on the Exploration and Peaceful Use of Outer Space, was the establishment of the so-called Action Team 14, Action Team on NEOs, that Bill mentioned earlier, in 2001. And this Action Team worked on developing recommendations for an international response to the near-Earth object impact threat. This Action Team also proposed to the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space to have an agenda item established, a regular agenda item on nearest objects, where member states exchange their views and inform each other on their national plans in terms of preparedness and mitigation, but also it established a working group on NEOs that at the end endorsed the recommendations of the Action Team. So this is where we are now, basically. The recommendations were endorsed by the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space and also by the General Assembly in 2013. And as a result, we had the establishment of the two entities. Their work is supported or facilitated by the United Nations, the International Asteroid Warning Network, and the Space Mission Plan Advisory Group. And both chairs of these two entities will give a more elaborate talk on their work later on. In 2016, UNOOSA, Office for Outer Space Affairs, also became the permanent secretariat to SMPAG. Both entities report annually on progress of their work to Scientific and Technical Subcommittee under the agenda item on nearest objects. Also, you'll probably hear in more detail later on by the chairs of SMPAG and I1, they reached an initial agreement on the criteria and thresholds for impact response actions and presented to CUPOS member states in 2017. This is a chart that, according to recommendations for an international response to a NEO threat, highlights how the decision-making process would go in case of a credible threat. So both I1 and SMPAG collaborate on that in terms of information exchange. SMPAG is the one that would come up with potential deflection mission plans and then inform through our office the Committee on Outer Space Affairs. Also 2017 was an important sort of proclamation of International Asteroid Day by the General Assembly resolution 7190, basically to raise awareness globally about the NEOs, their potential harmful impacts, and also the efforts in the area of planetary defense by SMPAG, Iowa, Office for Outer Space Affairs, and obviously member states of the committee and others. So in this year, 30th of June, this will be the first time that also the UN and the international community at that level will mark the International Asteroid Day. Other related activities that are also closely connected to planetary defense and that the Office for Outer Space Affairs has been involved in are the work of the Hague Space Resources Governance Working Group, where we regularly participate at the meetings, but also this year for the first time, the legal subcommittee, which is one of the committees of the subcommittees of the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space, had on its agenda a general exchange of views on potential legal models for activities in exploration, exploitation, and utilization of space resources, which also shows you the trends where what member states deem important to address at the global level. Also in 2016, there was an ERICHA international seminar on planetary emergencies, and their cosmic objects panel had several recommendations. They convene every year, and our representative was there in 2016. Where we are heading, just briefly, Unispace Plus 50, I mentioned before, SMPAG and Iowa are basically a result of Unispace 3 that was held in 1999 in Vienna. Unispace Plus 50 will be marked in 2018 as the major anniversary, but also a very important milestone opportunity to articulate at the global level a long-term vision for space. Iowa and SMPAG and planetary defense are obviously already mechanisms and processes for resilience and interoperability, and this is work in progress. But where we are heading is, these are the 7 Unispace thematic priorities with mechanisms agreed by the committee in 2016. And as we heard before, planetary defense is also closely related to other challenges such as space weather and space debris. And we are looking to work and strengthen also the cooperation in the planetary defense, but also in other areas such as space weather and space debris. Further areas for strengthening cooperation through UNOOSA on NEOs, we see here important opportunities in communication, dissemination of NEO-related information, and also capacity building activities through one of our programs, UN SPIDER, that works on disaster risk reduction. So with that, I would just like to alert you on some of the key dates for Unispace Plus 50 in 2018. We'll have a high-level segment on 20 to 21st of June in Vienna, and in preparation we are organizing a series of high-level fora, Space as a Driver for Socioeconomic Sustainable Development, and this is the next one, 6 to 9 November in Dubai. So with that, I thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romana. Can we entertain like a minute of the question and comments from audience? Yeah, of course, sir. Please raise your hand. No?
Well, if not, I'm here for the conference, so we can also chat.
Okay, the other one? Okay, right there. Okay, go ahead. One in the front. Can you speak out? Oh, probably, okay, microphone is coming up, sorry.
To what extent has the United Nations addressed the issue of weaponization in space as might be useful or needed for mitigation of threats? Not terrestrial, but extraterrestrial threats.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Yes, well, the committee that we work with, the Office for Outer Space Affairs, is the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space. So we basically deal only with the aspect of peaceful uses. So the issue of militarization and weaponization has been put before the Conference on Disarmament. Due to political reasons, and you know, Conference on Disarmament is based in Geneva. It has been in status quo for a while because there are difficult issues to tackle by member states. There's little consensus. Whereas the committee has been dealing with issues where consensus is easier to reach. So we're not addressing the issues of weaponization. We're addressing broader aspects of space securities connected to transparency and confidence building measures. We keep the register of objects launched into outer space as one of the important measures in that regard. But as I said, we do not address the issues of weaponization.
Space is already weaponized in the sense that asteroids are not peaceful. To what extent?
Oops.
Okay. Okay, we'll continue then over break. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for your comment anyway. Okay, so Romana, thank you again. So you want
Okay, so I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Timothy Spahr. He will talk about the International Asteroid Warning Network, history, background, and current status. Team operates as a private scientific consulting business and is currently involved in several research projects focused on NEOS. And he also assists NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office with various aspects of the International Asteroid Warning Network. The floor is yours.
Hello. I'm one of the chairs of afternoon session, and I've just noticed that quite a few of the talks are not loaded into the system yet. So if you're talking this afternoon, please go to the speaker room and load your talk in.
Okay, I am watching it. Okay, Bill intimidated me seriously with that. I am checking it out. So I'm going to go through things quickly. I'm going to talk about the International Asteroid Warning Network, and I would note that Romana covered a lot of the background stuff that I have in here, and I think it's great to give people all that information, because there was a whole lot of work that went on in the past decade on this. Okay, so going way back, recognition of the NEO, I'm calling near-Earth object threat. There was Comet Lexel in 1770 that came very close to the Earth. And in fact, this was the pioneering object for orbital studies in a lot of cases, using, bizarrely, the Laplace method, which I don't think anybody uses anymore. I don't know about Chodos. You don't use Laplace, do you? But this object, this was a comet that passed 0.015 astronomical units from the Earth. And there was a little bit of discussion about impacts at the time. So this has been out there. There was even discussion of, gaseous comets interacting with the atmosphere before that. So there's a lot of history in this subject, and it started with comets first. And of course, I just put up this woodcut from 1857 showing the Earth getting destroyed, and the smiling sun saying, well, it's about time somebody did that, right? And how angry the comet looks. Now, we can go to the first near-Earth asteroids. Eros was found in 1898. Apollo, that's the first object that actually crossed the orbit of the Earth, was not found until 1932, and then it was lost for 40 years. So there was a long time period in there. Aten, which is the first object with a semi-major axis less than 1 AU, wasn't discovered until 1976. And I would put a note down here, at the time of the lunar landings, there was still a little bit of debate in the 60s on whether or not they were going to find volcanoes instead of craters. So this will tell you we really didn't think that much about that problem. People are aware of impacts a little bit, but they were still debating the actual nature of the craters on the moon at the time. Now, as things start to get a little interesting, Ed and Lou and I were talking about this. In the last decade, it's been pretty nice. People are taking it seriously. It started back here in the 90s, where Congress, and Dave Morrison is here. I ran into him earlier. The Space Guard report that he's the principal author on was published in January 1992. And this is the origin, as I understand it, the goal of getting all the 1 kilometer objects because it removed the global hazard. Now, concurrently, Comet Shoemaker-Levy 9, or close to concurrently, was discovered and subsequently impacted Jupiter and really focused people on this problem. Someone else had mentioned that earlier today. And I would just note, anyone that knows Gene Shoemaker, right after that object was discovered, he had the whole thing pieced together that it was going to impact Jupiter. He had an email he sent to Brian Marsden within the day of discovery saying, oh, I bet it passed inside the Roche limit, broke up, and it's going to impact on the next pass. And that was sort of the way Gene was. He knew a lot of this stuff ahead of time. Down to 1998, Congress actually took the mandate, or issued the mandate to NASA to find the 1 kilometer objects. Now, the United Nations, as Romana has covered this, there was a conference in 1995 on the subject. Unispace focused a little bit more, encouraging coordination. Coordination is the key word here in this, because this is a worldwide problem. This is not an individual country problem. Formation of Action Team 14 in 2001, and they worked for the next decade, and I believe there were 27 states, different member states associated with it. So there's a lot of work, again, that went into this. And what happened was they made recommendations, as you saw in Romana's charts, there were recommendations that went up to the General Assembly, and they accepted a couple of those for the formation of a couple of groups. That would be the International Asteroid Warning Network and the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group, and you will hear from Gerhard about the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group shortly. Now, what we've ended up with for the International Asteroid Warning Network is a whole bunch of things that we're supposed to be doing, and I'm not going to read all of these. They're in the presentation there, but principally to discover, monitor, and physically characterize potentially hazardous objects. That's a big job. Just the first bullet is an awfully big job in here. There's a bunch of other information. We need a clearinghouse for the information. We need to serve appropriate information to the public. We already had a discussion of fake news, and as an asteroid person, I can tell you there's been fake news for my entire career in this. And not only things that get in the press, but all of us that work in the field get sort of kooky emails about how we're hiding there's really a killer asteroid called Wormwood and all this. So as we go down this list, on the left-hand side, oh wow, those were supposed to be checks. They didn't show up there. Anyway, down to about part E here, those things have been largely completed. They're not fully completed. And what's below that are things that we're still working on. Now, I will put this to recommend policies regarding criteria for thresholds. That has just been completed, and I think we're happy with those, and I'm going to present that shortly. So that's the next bit of communication. We've got some criteria for making sure people understand, if there's anything we think is interesting, it's going to go out to the public. Okay, so here's what we've got for the criteria for impact response actions. So the International Asteroid Warning Network will alert if there's an impact probability greater than 1% for anything we think is larger than 10 meters in size. Now, that happens to be a pretty rare event as it is. I think we would have had that tripped once. I believe it was Apophis that did that at Discovery, would have done it. But that's pretty rare that we get something like that. So right away, we're talking about something that doesn't happen that often. However, we want to be prepared, because the worst thing that can happen is you're not ready when you need to inform people and you don't have a communication plan. Well, we have the communication plan now. Terrestrial preparedness should start when we have anything that is predicted to impact in 20 years, and here the probability greater than about 10%, and the object is supposed to be larger than about 20 meters in size. And again, that's something, we like to think of Chelyabinsk as our sort of cornerstone object. That was a 20-meter object that did a bunch of damage on the ground. And so you definitely want to be aware of something like that. And just as a side note, a trivia note, there were a bunch of us that were at the UN when Chelyabinsk impacted. And so that was, it was kind of exciting, and it was also scary. I was really glad it hadn't gone right through the opposition net and been missed by all the surveys and impacted. That would have been a little bit worse. Okay, down to the bottom space, same page should start mission options planning when warned of a possible impact for something 50 years, probability greater than 1%, and something that is 50 meters in size. Basically, if it's 50 meters, you probably don't want to take the hit. You want to consider deflecting it. Okay, so this is the exact slide. See how we all like to have the same slides in here to get the point home exactly, but this has all been worked on already. So the International Asteroid Warning Network contains the observers, analysts, orbit computers, modelers, physical observation people. If there's an object that's coming, we'll determine the impact time, the location, and severity. That information goes back and forth between the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group. Can envision a scenario where ESA is actually providing physical characterization for an object via a spacecraft, and that tells us how big the object is. That's going to tell us about the severity of the impact, et cetera. And this information is communicated to the Committee on the Peaceful Use of Outer Space and UNOOSA directly. Now, we do have some signatories to the International Asteroid Warning Network, and we've got several groups here. I put down in the corner NASA and ESA because everybody knows about NASA and ESA, and they've got a lot of assets. What this means, just as a side note, is the Minor Planet Center, which is funded by NASA, is under the umbrella of IWAN. All the surveys that you're going to hear about, we've got John Tonry here, Richard Wainscoat, Eric Christensen from Atlas, from Catalina, and from Pan-STARRS. They are under IWAN because they're getting their funding from NASA. And similar, Detlef does some follow-up, or at least some of your people do, with telescopes run by ESA, so you're under the umbrella. There's these other groups here as well. European Southern Observatory, University of Nariño in Colombia. Peter Birtwistle, an amateur astronomer in England. I contacted him and said, would you like to sign? And he said, absolutely. This guy's been providing useful follow-up astrometry. And you can go through, we've got the Russian Academy of Sciences. Going to hear a talk from Kasi a little bit later. And this is a group in Mexico here. Now, I'm going to make just one little note about future surveys and exercising the system that we've put in place here. I told you that it's pretty rare that we get something that would require the formal communication path that we've set down. But it would also tell you that the field is garnering a lot of support, a lot of additional funding and advancement as we speak. And so future surveys are being upgraded. So you will hear about this. I'm not going to spoil the talks, but Atlas has 2 telescopes. Now Pan-STARRS has 2 telescopes. Catalina has upgraded all of their telescopes to larger, more efficient detectors. The point being, with just what we have with funded upgrades, we're going to see a large increase in the number of discoveries. This doesn't even include, I'm not talking about LSST or NeoCam or anything else like that that could come along and provide a huge increase in discoveries. If that happens, we are definitely going to be exercising the communication link more often. And I would expect, I sort of think in the next couple of years, we'll get something that pops above this 1%, and we'll get to see how this system works. And this is pretty much how things will go right now. The object will be announced by the Minor Planet Center. That's the international clearinghouse for the objects. They will publish a preliminary orbit. JPL has a system, and also PISA, NEODIS 2. They have systems that monitor every single object to check for possible impacts in the future. And so the way this will go is the MPC will announce it, and we'll get information from CNEOS and NEODIS after a high precision orbit calculation, and they'll communicate back up the ladder and say, all right, we've got something that needs monitoring. Now, I believe you're going to get to see a little bit of how this system will work during the exercise we've got planned later in the week. And I've signed up to participate in that, so I'm kind of curious to see. And I'm looking at Paul, because Paul's the diabolical guy that organizes all of this. So I'm sure you've got some tricks that I'm not aware of coming up with this. All right, and with that, I'll leave you with an image, and I'll take questions. Yeah, it would. Oh, wait, there's a mic coming down. Well, let's, because if there's anyone online, I want to make sure they can hear. I'm still intimidated. It's red, too. It's scaring me, man.
Thanks, Tim. Great talk. Just wondering if you guys thought a little bit more about the criterion threshold, because they all include an impact probability. But in some sense, it's kind of a little unsatisfying, because the impact probability isn't the real probability in some sense. It's really a statement about the uncertainty in our observations. it's not sort of a physical chance whether or not that object is going to hit us. It either is or it isn't. It's just that if the impact probability is low, for instance, it really could just mean we've got bad observations.
Okay, yeah, I think I see where you're going with it. It's actually, I think Lindley may have phrased it this way. This is, in some sense, our ignorance of the actual situation is measured by
it's one over our ignorance or something like that.
Yeah. So what this is that by the time you get to a 1% measurement, I think you've collapsed down a lot of the uncertainty and the kind of thing. Yeah, we know that everything's binary, yes or no, at some point. Yeah. However, when you get things that are about 1%, we've worked it down quite a bit. You know, the probability of things on the CNEOS page right now is 10 to the minus 4, 10 to the minus 5. And so a 10 to the minus 2 would be a big deal. And you're not going to get 10 to the minus 2 with a really short arc orbit because it will necessarily be more uncertain than that.
True, but what I'm saying is that there might be some combination of impact probability and best guess at close approach distance. That's really maybe a better summary of how concerned you should be.
Yeah, I've probably exhausted my knowledge of the specifics, and Paul or Steve, or I believe Andrea Milani may be here, so that this is for sort of another level.
This is certainly a deeper question.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tim. Now let's move on to our third speaker, which is Dr. Gerhard Drolshagen, currently affiliate the University Oldenburg in Germany, but he has recently retired from ESA, and then he used to co-manage ESA's Space Situational Awareness NEO segment. And he now works on the field of space environmental study for many years, including space debris all the way to NEOs. And now he's a chair of what he's going to talk about, that is Space Mission Planning Advisory Group. Gerhard.
Okay, thank you for the introduction. Yes, I think I'm a third in this line of presentations of these UNOOSA, United Nations formed groups, and I will talk about the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group in a little bit more detail, just to give you an overview. It was mentioned twice before, but that is this group, if you just look at the title, Space Mission Planning Advisory Group, so it's an advisory group. It will not take any decisions eventually, whether you would do something, but it should look at technical options. And you see the short form, you heard it a few times, same page. I mean, we had some thinking about how you would pronounce this acronym, SMPAG, and finally, so we agreed on the name same page. And I'm giving this presentation on behalf of all the same page members. I will have a list of who those are. First, some background information. So the same page was officially established in February 2014. So it's just a little over 3 years old now, following a recommendation of the Action Team 14. And this recommendation was endorsed by the United Nations. So together with the formation of the I1 group, where we just heard about. It has some formal terms of reference, and they were finalized in June 2014. And so it's a little bit more of formal groups than the I1, which is a network of those who can contribute to discovery and risk calculations. Then the same page has established a work plan in November 2015, which is a living document. That means here we have certain issues identified, at present 11, where specifically some work is being performed on those issues, like reference missions. I mean, I will not go really in deep detail in this one. As was mentioned by Romana, once a year we report annually to the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee of UN COPUS, and also this report or parts thereof are entered into the official report of that group, which is then forwarded to COPUS and eventually to the General Assembly of the United Nations. And the UNOOSA, the Office for Outer Space Affairs, acts as permanent secretary for same page, so we are very happy that they can do this and help us with maintaining documents and organizing meetings. I'm showing this picture. It's a slightly modified version of what you have seen before. The connection between I1 same page and UNOOSA. I think seeing this picture 3 times in the first 3 presentations also shows that somehow the coordination is working between those groups. So I'm not giving any more detail on this picture now here. Some background additional information on the purpose and the membership of this group. So first, the purpose of the same page, as written in the terms of reference, is listed here: to prepare for an international response to a neo-impact threat through the exchange of information, development of options for collaborative research and mission opportunities, and neo-threat mitigation planning activities. And membership is not fully open, so we expect that members are national space agencies or governmental or intergovernmental entities that coordinate and fund space activities and are capable of contributing to or carrying out a space-based neo-mitigation campaign. So we want to have members who have some capability on potentially contributing to a deflection activity, which is the main subject of the same page. And here is a present list of members. So according to the terms of reference, you have to send a letter that you want to join, and so far everyone has been accepted, but it can be space agencies, space offices. You see listed on top the 16 existing members. The I1 is a member ex officio, because we have to have a close connection between the I1 who makes a discovery and tells us there is an object with a certain impact probability and a certain size, and then same page might get interaction. So in addition to those 16 agreed members, we have some permanent observers. They are listed here: 4, the Association of Space Explorers, the IAA, which is also sponsoring this conference, the International Astronomical Union, and UNOOSA, who is also acting as secretary. And we have intention of membership indicated by several other nations listed at the bottom. Austria, there we have already received an official application. Canada is planning to join. China has expressed interest. And also the Czech Republic. So soon we are probably 20 members, and it's open to others who can make a contribution. For the scope, there are 4 main areas are identified again in the terms of reference as scope of the Space Mission Planning Advisory Group, which should be pursued in close coordination with the International Asteroid Warning Network. Again, it's also listed in the terms of reference again. So the first one, recommend and define reference missions, technology roadmaps, and collaborative research. That's very important. So one of the top objectives, just to see that what can be done. And then identify opportunities for international collaboration on research, technologies, and techniques for space-based neo-mitigation. Keep members informed about national activities and communicate its activities to the public. I guess the presentations that will come after mine are also serving the second purpose, to keep members informed. And it's not just happening at the United Nations level, but also at conferences. 2 more bullet points. So in case of a credible threat, recommend viable concepts for a possible mitigation campaign and recommend operational responsibilities. Recommend in both cases, so no decision taking. And also the last bullet listed here, identify for possible detailed review within appropriate forums any legal and policy issues, for example, liabilities, if you do something or if you do nothing, that may arise in undertaking neo-mitigation actions. So these are the 4 bullets from the terms of reference, which more or less describe the main scope. And in practical terms, we have right now identified 11 specific work plan activities. I will not go through those one by one, but just mentioning some deal with reference missions to see for certain types of orbits of a potential NEO and for certain sizes of the object and time until impact, what could be done. So that we have some references that if a real threat appears, we could have more or less a look up, okay, this falls close to this option. I mean, in reality, in practice, every case will be different for every thread. That's quite clear. But we should have some references that one gets an idea, okay, it takes this long, we could use these type of deflection means, that this should be worked out, and that is one of or several of these work plan issues are dealing with it. Other issues are the definition, when should we get interaction, and also something on communication guidelines. There's also one item working on what tools do you need for a better characterization. Because before you might take a decision, you might first want to get more information on the object, precise positional information, bringing down the impact probability, but also physical characterization like mass or composition of the object, like density. So we have one of those. Also, there's one of these 11 items is also to look at the nuclear option. So that's also included. From a technical point of view, we should consider all potential means. Just to give you one example on some results that we obtained already, I think Tim mentioned it. So one of the first results that came out of one of these 11 items, actually out of the first one, is threshold criteria for same page action. I mean, this was a joint activity between I1 and same page. And you see here, if you have small objects here on the left, you see these recent impact event, a 40-meter size impact crater in Caracas in 2007, which was caused by an object of a few meters in size. On the right, this 20-meter size object in Chelyabinsk. I mean, these are sizes that are certainly of interest for I1 to discover them, to inform people if you see them coming, to provide some warnings. But even if you had known those, both we did not see coming, then you would not have considered taking any deflection options, of course. So here is clearly a size where you would issue a warning, but you would not consider any deflection means. If the object gets bigger, 50 meters, like the one in Arizona, or even bigger, 1 kilometer object, what you see here is the impact crater of the Nördlinger Ries, which is in southern Germany. It's about 25 kilometers in diameter. You can still clearly see it if you sit somewhere here on the rim, which is still a bit elevated, and you can really see the crater shape. So it should have happened 15 million ago and 50 million years ago, and was about a 1 kilometer size object. These are bigger objects where you would want to deflect it if you can. Whether you can do anything with a 1 kilometer size object is a different question. But these are the size ranges where you certainly would consider doing something. And coming back to this, one of the first results, this is a proposed threshold criteria. It was also already mentioned before, when you might consider same page to get interaction. So not for the small objects, but it says start mission options planning in case of. It also means then you start to look, do we have something or what could be done? If you have a 1% probability of impact within the next 50 years and by an object larger than 50 meters in size. It was mentioned before, there are always some uncertainties. I mean, the impact probability shows, yeah, the orbit is uncertain, but here you have a 1% and then you could start looking at it. And likely it will drop to 0 relatively soon, but it shows here you have an object where you start considering it. Also an object larger than 50 meters in size. You probably will not know if the uncertainty in the orbit is such that you have a 1% probability. Typically the object might be have an uncertainty of a range at least a factor 2. If you looked at the exercise that we are running here, and the object there, this artificial asteroid PDC 2017, has a size indicated between 100 meters and 250 meters initially. It has a 1% impact probability. So that is a type of objects where you would consider looking at potential options, not getting into big activities, but start to look, do we have something in our plan, and can we get advice from same page, what is available, what could be done? It should help the decision making, not take decisions by itself. And finally, this is actually coming to an end. Up to now, so it was established in 2014. It's a fairly recent group. And groups at the United Nations don't work always so fast. So you have to reach consensus and you have to get people together. But here are some results that were achieved. First of all, I mean, we have already one official statement that is endorsed by this group about the need for an asteroid orbit deflection demonstration mission. It does not endorse any one specific mission, like a kinetic impactor or a gravity tractor, but it says at least you have to demonstrate that it can be done for an asteroid, that we have the technical capability. So it is really a recommendation that at least one demonstration mission shall be performed. Of course, AIDA is one idea. We heard from ESA's Director General that so far, at least the ESA part doesn't look too good right now for financial reasons. But it's at some time it will have to happen to get confidence that we can actually do it. Then some reports on work plan items have been delivered, like the proposed thresholds for same-page action, which are just presented. And also last year, an ad hoc working group on legal issues was officially established. So it was during the 7th meeting last year in October. And we will hear more about those, what they are doing at the next presentation that will be given by Line. And actually, I mean, it is the participation membership is a little bit close to those who can perform space activities. But the information, the summary report of each of the meetings and also the presentations are generally available at this URL given there below, samepage.net. You can find the information of all these presentations. Also the statement to endorse a deflection demonstration mission, you can also find there. And these threshold criteria are also in the last summary report. And I think with this, I'm getting a first or second warning. I thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Gerhard. Maybe we can take one quick question right there. Can you run the microphone, please? Right there. Oh, yeah, you clock two? Okay, well, that case, okay, just go one there and then clock 6 seconds. Yeah, that's right. 10-second question.
As you know, 50 meters is not directly measurable. You measure initially just the brightness, could be off a long way. In fact, because of the bimodal distribution of asteroid albedos, if you assume an average albedo, you're almost sure to get it wrong. So how will you interpret that 50-meter criterion?
Well, actually, the text is a little bit more elaborate. It gives, or roughly, an absolute magnitude in the specification, but still there will be some uncertainties on the size then. There is some uncertainty. It's a rough guidance to get some idea that for a 20-meter size object you would not do it, but for a 67-meter size object you would definitely consider doing something, and the first action would be to bring down the impact probability and to get some information on the true size of the object. It's a rough idea. It's clear there is always an uncertainty in both respects, yes.
I think that issue will be more followed up in the following days, yeah? Clark, can you find 5 seconds or otherwise? Okay, well, that case probably just you can discuss later on. That was the same question. Okay, very nice. I was almost question same thing. Thanks too. Okay, thank you, Gerhard, again.
So the next presentation will be given by Line Drube on same-page working group on legal issues in planetary defense. Line has for the last 5 years worked at the German Aerospace Institute in Berlin on the NeoShield project. She's also a member of same-page and coordinator of the working group, of this ad hoc working group on legal issues. So Line, please.
All right. So I'm going to talk about this new group that was set up, the same-page ad hoc working group on legal issues. And it was established, as said, here in the fall. And since then, we've had two telecons and 2 meetings, and actually produced text and starting to work on this issue. And we are hoping to get the first report out by the next Planetary Defense Conference before then. So hopefully by the next one, we can come with some real results at this meeting. So the group members is split into 2 groups. We have the red ones here. These are the legal experts. So space law lawyers or international lawyers here from 7 different countries. And then in blue, we have our technical team, which are mostly people from SMPAG. So the lawyers, they should answer the questions that we have about the legal issues when you do a deflection mission. So the work of SMPAG. And our technical experts are there to explain how how missions are accomplished and answer any questions they might have. I'm also part of the SMPAG group and a scientist, but I coordinate this group because we wanted to have it started. Me and Elisa Hadaji coordinate the group and trying to get it to go in the correct direction, because if you just leave lawyers with some questions, they might go off in a different direction than we actually expect them to. So we coordinating the work and kind of guiding it slightly. So, first of all, if you have ever tried dealing with lawyers, I'm going to start with a disclaimer, because otherwise I would probably had to have written out the whole talk and had it signed by everyone. So, the views in this talk is expressing my interpretation of the current discussions within the group, and I may not represent everybody in it. So, all right, got that one out of the way. So some of the questions that we're actually interested in, and the reason why we started this group, was things like, do we have a responsibility to protect? So in SMPAG, we're only the countries that can actually do something in a spacefaring nation that could actually help in a situation. And as you could see, that was 15 countries that was in that group. But we got quite a few in the world, so if the impact is going to happen in a different country than that, do we have a responsibility to protect them? And also, what is the international laws regarding that? And let's say there's a mission failure, it's impacting in any ways, or if it's partial mission failure, now it impacts a different country. Are the countries that did these good Samaritans, who actually did these missions, are they liable for the new damage that the impact would cause? Or let's say we have the case of a bit similar to the one we have right now. Let's say if it's going to impact down close to Beijing, and it's too late for us to actually do anything about it, that you can't get it completely off the world, and you're just going to move it. Let's say you want to move it towards the Gobi Desert instead of Beijing. Can you? What's the legal implication of that? Can you contact Mongolia and ask if you can have it impact there instead? What is? How do you deal with this? And then there's also, if it's going to impact, the impact corridor is in several countries. What is the decision-making structure? Because in SMPAG right now, the plan is that we give advice to the United Nations. But what happens then? Who do we actually give it to? We'll give it to someone. What happens? How do they actually make the decisions? So this is very political questions and not illegal as such. But we would like to look into what has been done previously in other similar situation, so that we could have some idea of which way it could go. And if you now have, if you need an international forum of some kind, if you're several countries in the impact corridor, and can you go ahead without the consensus of all the affected countries, or do you need consensus, of all? And how to deal with potential controversial deflection mission, mostly the nuclear option, and the role of private entities, for example, Airbus, or let's say a rich person decides he wants personally to deflect an asteroid. What is the legal situation? Who are they liable, or who are liable at that point? So why even look at this before it actually happens? Before an impact? Why can't we just wait? And my opinion is that there's likely that it would delay our deflection missions if we waited to start these discussions. And I think people are also a bit more clear-headed when it's not their country on the line. You could probably get some more impartial, neutral regulations in place if you're not yourself right there on the impact line. So what should be understood first, which was a bit of surprise for me, is that, is that you can have space treaties and space agreements out there, but that doesn't mean they actually mean anything. For example, if we look at the Outer Space Treaty and the Moon Agreement, what you see here is the non-partisan. So if you have, when the Moon Agreement came out, not everybody signed, as you see in red, about all the countries that has the possibility of sending up, launching things, did not sign that agreement. And then you have in yellow the ones who signed but never put it into their national law. So only the green ones are the one that went through the ratification of it. So you have the Moon Agreement and then the Outer Space Treaty, which is more widely. So that's also something to keep in mind when you look at these space treaties and all. The legal situation is whether they actually have any backing at all. Another, looking through all the different legal framework there is right now, there's no mention of asteroid impact at all, or deflection. So there's none that actually directly fit to this issue with mention. However, there might be some regulation international laws that can be used. And one of our jobs are to figure out which of the questions that are not answered, which ones are answered, and then trying to get in the report out so that everybody can read, get an idea of what is the legal framework existing at the moment, or where do we actually miss some. So the scope of this group is to first formulate the questions that we would like answered from a deflection mission. So it's a space mission from the point of view. And after that, then look into the existing framework or the existing legal context to see which one is covered, and then, when necessary, suggest possible ways forward. That, as we say, we're an advisory group. It doesn't mean we can make any decisions, but we can possibly look into what could be possible, and then provide ongoing legal advice to the same page. So, some of the questions that we have been discussing until now, some of the issues is obligations, liability, decision to act, mitigation measures, and private interests. And to go into some of the details here, you have the obligations. What we have, looking into the international law right now, you have in international environmental law, it states that states are required to take precautionary measures according to their abilities or capabilities in order to prevent environmental pollution or harm. It could be that we can use this as also covering asteroid impacts. And then in the UN Charter, you have a very general duty to cooperate in order to solve humanitarian problems. This line covers many things, but maybe also asteroids. And if you have the UN Spider organization, that aims at sharing information from satellites, space-based, about harmful phenomena to the natural environment. So this might also covers the fact that if one country discovers information about an asteroid that's going to impact, it is obligated to share that, or maybe not obligated, but yeah. And liability. At the moment, the launching states are liable for damage caused by the space object. So it's the good Samaritans who will send up a mission that's also liable for any damage that is caused by that one, or any that you can go back to the fact that this was launched. Maybe this is not what we really would like, because it could be that it would reduce the willingness to help other states. So if it was one that's not going to, normally one state could go up and send a mission to protect themselves, but if that's not possible and someone else has to do it for them, then that other person or other country is actually liable at the moment based on these things. So that might be something that we could look into if that is what we really want in our case. So the decision to act and this whole decision-making structure. So we've been looking into the kind of international forums where you could where you can bring people together and discuss, especially the people in the impact corridor. But which kind of situation? We've looked into, for example, the United Nations General Assembly or the security. I forgot the name. But anyway, we've looked into several of the different UN groups, and there's always a different, who's in it and who's not, and can you be sure that the people in the impact corridor has enough to say? Because the thing is, states have sovereignty over their territories, which means if the impact is going to happen in one country, that country do have a complete say in what's going to happen. However, if the impact corridor is over several countries, how do you then deal with it? Do you need to consent of all the states, or is it majority, or is it all? How do you deal with this compared to the fact that they have sovereignty over their territories? And also, to have international agreed criteria for impact response would avoid a lot of the problems, a lot of the discussions. If that could be agreed upon before, then that would really help a lot. So, at the moment, looking into the nuclear option, then in the Outer Space Treaty, it says that there's no placing of objects carrying nuclear weapons into outer space. That you could say it's not weapons and all that, but then in 1963, they created the treaty banning nuclear weapons test in the atmosphere, in outer space, and underwater. That prohibits any nuclear explosion in outer space. Are there any loopholes? There might be, or we might need to create them. Otherwise, can you get UN Security Council to authorize such a mission? Or are there any ways of getting around this so that we could use the nuclear option? And lastly, with the private entities, that seemed to be a more solved problem. That is, realize that they are covered by the country they are in, the launching state, or the country that sets them. That country is liable for all the private activity that happens in that country. So, nope. Okay. Well, it was just a slide with my... Okay. Well, so it's just the last slide, it doesn't matter. But all in all, we're hoping to have the report done by beginning of 2019. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Line. So we have 20 seconds. Maybe we can take one short question. Gentleman over there, please. Just a second, you'll get the mic.
Well illustrated the problem arising when deflection is gradual in moving the impact point on the Earth. This has a lot of political and even legal implications. But one thing which is less known is that the same problem occurs when you use an instantaneous method. Because even if you apply deflection, which is instantaneous, the problem is that most other asteroids do not have a single opportunity to impact the Earth. They have a sequence of opportunities or keyholes. So as an example, if you deflect too much, you can move the orbit from one which impacts in a given year to another one which will impact in another year, and of course in a different point on the Earth. So you have the same legal issues arise also with instantaneous deflection. In particular, there are very serious problems if you use a brute force method like nuclear explosions, because you need to have not only a lower limit to the effect, but also an upper limit to the effect, because by overdoing deflection, you might end up with deflection in another place. And I don't know if this is known, but this legal issue should be considered.
Yes, thank you. I think we are out of time. Thank you.
Okay, now let's have another, the next speaker, who's Dr. Lindley Johnson, who's a Planetary Defense Officer of the Planetary Science Division of NASA Headquarters Science Mission Directorate. Lindley is going to talk about advancement of planetary defense in the United States. Lindley?
It's thinking about it. Before I get started, though, I'd like to applaud Linnae for taking over something that I don't think she fully realized what she was getting into when she became chair of the working group to handle all of the legal and international agreement nuances. So I appreciate her leading that group and helping us struggle with all those things. Probably have too many of these things loaded up now, and we need to boot a few of them out. Yeah, looks like you got it there. Okay. You've just hit OK on that one. You'll be OK. Yeah, it's NASA talk. Okay, thanks very much. Okay, well, let's see. I've got, as usual, far too many slides to talk about in the time I've been given. And so, luckily for you, a good part of my slides have already been talked about somewhat, so I can skip through those fairly quickly. And most of the others, I am just introducing the topic because you're going to be hearing a presentation later on in the week by somebody as part of our efforts in the United States. Okay, which way do we do this one? Try this one. Okay, yep, that one works. Okay, well, you've already seen this slide very many times, and so you see that we are all organized and on the same page as to how we're approaching these things internationally. And I just wanted to say with this slide that the efforts in the United States and the Planetary Defense Coordination Office are all in support of the international arrangements that we have talked about, and our efforts with our survey teams and our characterization projects and with the deflection demonstrations that we're talking about are all in support of these international efforts under I-1 and same page. Since the last Planetary Defense Conference in the United States and NASA, we have now set up our Planetary Defense Coordination Office. Been in existence in about 1.5 years now. And our three main bullets, the purpose of the Coordination Office are listed there: detect any potential for significant impact, and provide information about that, appraise what could happen, the effects of that possible impact, and help develop strategies to mitigate and lead those efforts both in the national forum and in the international arena. Detailed more listing of our responsibilities are here. I'm not going to go through them. They'll be in the presentation that you can pull off the line. But you might ask, how is it that we would organize such an effort? And we use a construct that has been used with a lot of similar problems through the years, particularly in my background in the national security space business. Well, we talk about an OODA loop. OODA loop, you've ever heard of an OODA loop? Well, that's just an acronym for these segments in approaching a problem. You need to observe, which is involved in detection of a potential threat, orient on that threat. What does it mean? Is it going to, where is it going to occur? How severe is it? decide what are you going to do about it, very simply, and then act on that decision, implement whatever you decided to do. And then the final part there, it's another A that got added. Somewhere along the line, they decided, well, after we act, we really ought to assess how well we did, how successful were we, and then this cycle then occurs again and again as you step through the problem and are either successful or not in your implementation. So the OODA loop provides us a construct that we help organize our activities in the Planetary Defense Coordination Office. And so we see all the familiar things that we talk about in NEO observation and planetary defense arena. Detecting objects, following up on their orbits to secure them, do precision orbit determination, characterization of the objects, understanding its size, composition, so that we can understand what effects might occur if there is an impact, plan on what we're going to do to mitigate that situation, whether it be just civil defense, move people out of the way, or undertake a planetary defense in space deflection mission, coordinate those actions both nationally and internationally, implement the mitigation activity, and then assess our results of that activity to see if we were successful or not, or whether we need to continue the action and what we can, lessons learned we can take away from it. So the Planetary Defense Coordination Office sits in the middle of all this activity to try to organize and support and enable activities in all these areas. And we have another number of projects in the United States looking at all these various segments of the activity, and you will hear presentations. There we got up. Then we will hear presentations from many of the project teams that are on this planetary defense cycle. So most of you by now are very familiar with our NEO search programs that we support at NASA. Of course, we also support the efforts of the Minor Planet Center, the international node for all observations from around the world. And also another change since the last Planetary Defense Conference, the enhancement of the activities at the Jet Propulsion Lab into the Center for NEO Studies and all the efforts that go into determining the threat from any particular object and the probability of impacts, and taking all that expertise and knowledge in developing these exercises like we're going to have here and the diabolical scenarios that Paul Chodos comes up with. So current status of our survey efforts, these, I should say that this is not these cumulative numbers. Statistics are throughout the world, efforts internationally, not just in the US. But at this time we are a little over 16,000, just across 16,000 objects, near-Earth asteroids in our catalog last month. And with our direction in the US to find all those that are greater than 140 meters in size, or at least 90% of them, that represents not quite a half of those objects, and you see that the discovery rate right now is greatest in the smaller size of those objects. At the 1 kilometer in size, our original objective, we're at 874 now, right at 1,800 potentially hazardous asteroids in our catalog. Those that come within 7.5 million kilometers of the Earth, and therefore into orbits that could be collision hazards in the foreseeable future. And then 158 of those are a kilometer or larger in size. Our discovery rate over the years has been increasing as we brought new capabilities online and enhancement of existing projects. In fact, in 2016, we almost made it to 1,900 objects of all sizes discovered, and that represents about an 83% increase just in a period of about 3 years. So you see, in the last few years, we've had quite an enhancement in our detection and tracking capabilities. And we're on track here in 2017 to even exceed that. If we stay on this pace, we will get to 2,000 objects discovered in 2017. But we have a ways to go. If we take that population of 140 meter and larger objects, thought to be somewhere around 25,000, 26,000 objects, though we're updating this population estimate right now with our new science definition team. We see with those that are not found in that population, we still have about 70% of the objects yet to find of that 25,000 as of last month. Characterization efforts, we use a number of systems that we support at NASA in this effort. The NASA infrared telescope facility in Hawaii is used quite a bit in the small bodies community for characterization efforts. We also use ground-based radars. You're going to hear presentations later on from the teams that use these facilities for NIA characterization. And to some extent, when the object is accessible, we also use the Spitzer Space Telescope, which is well into its warm phase now, with limited capabilities, both with detection and accessibility to these objects. But when we use it when we can. Radar is a very powerful technique to use, and particularly if the object is within range for doing detailed imaging. Most recently, 2014 JO25 presented us a very interesting looking object. Certainly that shape probably reminds a lot of people in this room of something else. Both imaging and spectra was taken by our facilities during its close approach last month. Looking at mitigation, we have been working along the lines of what was suggested to us by our National Research Council in the dealing with potential for space mitigation efforts. This chart is out of the report in 2010, in that if the object was large and the warning was short, there was probably only one option that was effective. Of course, if you'd always want to take the civil defense option and protect the population as you can. Kinetic impactor, though, is seen as being a mature technology that could be used and probably effective, except for smaller objects, except for very short-term warning scenarios. And gravity tractor, it was attractive, although a longer time would be needed, and effective against the smaller part of the catalog, but then it's the more frequent impactors are in that smaller range. So if we find them far enough ahead of time, gravity tractor offers a very controllable, more controllable way of doing that. And I'm going to exceed my time because I got started late. Looking at the nuclear option, though, we have efforts going on between our NASA centers, particularly Goddard Space Flight Center and the Department of Energy labs, in looking at what could be done in short warning scenarios. And you'll see some presentations on that later on. Kinetic impactor, deflection technique. We have a very active development in a space program that you've heard about from Dr. Warner earlier, our collaborative effort with the European Space Agency on AIDA, and our DART component to that from the US is moving forward we're on track to start the Phase B effort here in the next month and have funding through calendar year 2017, and it's an item for the 28 budget as well. Enhanced gravity tractor, although the going to be hung up here, but although the asteroid redirect mission, it was not included in the budget for 2018 and therefore will not go forward. With the work that was done by the investigation team on ARM, we learned a lot about the gravity tractor technique and what might be done and how that could be enhanced, particularly between looking at halo orbits and inline gravity tractors, and the investigation team will have presentations on that later in the week. Also, within our multiple efforts in the U.S. government, we get data in on detected fireballs, bolides entering our atmosphere, and we maintain a database on that. There are some 800 events now in that database from the last 30 years. I'm just showing the ones that are 1 kiloton and larger here, which represents about 80 of them. So we get 2 or 3 of those every year. And of course, Chelyabinsk is the larger of those events. Another project you're going to hear quite a bit about this week is done by our Asteroid Threat Assessment Project led by Ames, working across the community, though, for understanding the effects of these objects as they enter the atmosphere based upon their compositions, and what the effects, both thermal and shock on the ground, might be to inform our decision making on whether anything needs to be done, and if so, what can be done and how we might go about doing that. One last thing I want to talk about is work that has been done at the interagency level within the U.S. government with the interagency working group on detecting and mitigating the impact of earthbound near-Earth objects, or so-called DAMIAN working group. That's a tortured acronym if ever there was one. But this was set up at the White House level, Executive Office of the President, Office of Science and Technology Policy, with 2 aims. First of all, to develop a preparedness strategy to deal with NEOs, and then a more detailed action plan for what the various agencies would contribute to that effort. In 2016, we successfully were able to write, coordinate, and get approved our preparedness strategy, and that was published in December. And so we're ready to pick up this activity as soon as the new administration has their people on the ground in this effort. One of the things that helps guide that work and strategy is this timeline, and you have a presentation on it and the activities in this area as part of the decision-making section this week. And then lastly, the impact emergency response exercises that we conduct with our Federal Emergency Management Agency. We had our 3rd exercise this last fall. There is a report that's about to come out on that. And you see we picked the most interesting areas in the world in these scenarios. With this one, an impact in the Los Angeles basin, and worked with the local FEMA region there and the state of California government on this planning response to this activity. And so the expertise and efforts that we utilize for our exercises in the U.S. are all being used here with the exercise this week in the Planetary Defense Conference. So you're in for quite a show. And with that, I'll take any questions if we have any time.
Thank you, Lindley, but I don't really have any time.
Okay, well, I'm here all week. I'm here all week.
It's certainly very dense discussion, and I'm sure that there are lots of questions during the lunch break. Okay, Thanks, Lindley.
So our next speaker is then Mr. Boris Shustov. He's a science director at the Institute of Astronomy at the Russian Academy of Sciences and also vice president of the International Astronomical Union. And he is going to talk about the activities in Russia on NEO, progress in instrumentation study and of consequences and coordination. So once we have this set up, the floor should be yours.
First of all, I would like to greet all the participants of the meeting on behalf of International Astronomical Union. Last Friday we have completed discussion many issues related to the activity of International Astronomical Union. One of them was the support of the new activity in all countries and on the astronomical level. So that's I will mention once more this issue later, but now I come to Russia, planetary defense activity in Russia. I would like to introduce and to thank my co-authors from various ministries, agencies, also from Academy of Sciences and from Moscow University. They are not all of them, but they are co-authors of my paper of this presentation either. So issues to be presented in very brief: coordination, instrumentation, collision consequences. They are not all issues we are working on, but most important here. Coordination. First, I would like to say that for maybe 6 years, I argue for the necessity of the national program, for Russia at least. I think that it is actual also for other countries. Why we argue for the national NEO program? It is not kind of, how to say, that isolation from the international. No, to be efficient partner in the international work, we should be very well prepared for this work. So we should be well organized at the national level. That's why. The reasons are common here, that's I just list them. The NEO program is a multi-problem. Various organizations are to be involved, coordinated. Coordinations of ministries and so on is not so easy. Capabilities of research centers are not sufficient for implementation and support modern service of detection and monitoring, especially when some space-borne facilities are required, at least for Russia. I mean that some rich American universities are capable to do this in full scope, but by us not. The expensive technologies of preventing, also same comments on these technologies are here. Cooperation from countries on the new problem implies the involvement of Russian government, all governments, of course, authorized bodies, because it is a really international program, high-level international problem. And regular funding. Life is life. Life is not easy. That it is absolutely necessary, at least for realization of program. The groups which are working on the problem should be supported each day. That's why we need for this program. That's what is the progress here. That's eventually we are lucky to have some elements of the program to be included in the federal space program, which is in fact the major space planning facility in Russia. It is a state law for 10 years, and starting 2016 up to 2025. So that we have prepared a full scope program for in expert working group of NEO by Space Council of the Russian Academy of Sciences, but some elements were included. In December of 2015, we published a book in Russian on NEO problem, and the goal was to give information for the authorities in Russia, not only for all the community in Russia, but also for authorities. They don't read English for sure. That's why we were obliged to publish only in Russian. So that the first time this book includes not only just the reviews on NEO problem, various aspects, but also some results of experience of emergency committee, which is same as the FEMA in the United States and this ministry, and some experiences in here. I will provide this book to our Japanese colleagues to host to Professor Yoshikawa. But if somebody would like to have this Russian book, I have PDF file either. So that international activities, of course, any national problems should be incorporated in the international cooperation on the NEO problem. Roscosmos plans to activate participation in the SMPG. It's not good to say, but Roscosmos is listed as a partner in the SMPG program, but nevertheless, it participated not actively in this, but they promised any time when I go into the conference that they will participate for sure. I think that's eventually we have them. Russian astronomical research institutions and private observatories contribute observational data to MPC. We begin to join the international project IVAN. There are some prejudices in participation in IVAN. Some people say that it is a program that requires for some fees and so on. I try to explain that it's not. It is just how to say that the free organization, free access, and it is a way to cooperate, really cooperate. So since last year, Russian institutions participate in the famous now PR project, Asteroid Day. We plan some actions for 30th of June. It is an anniversary of Tunguska event. That's for me, I will deliver the special talk in Moscow Planetarium. We will be in Moscow. I could arrange your visit there. Okay. The statement by EIU was made by General Secretary of IIU, Piero Benvenuti. I listed it here because I was in the authors of this statement. The major issues of this statement is to support this activity on news by IVAN, by SMPAG, also to express some support for AIDAP program. You know that they have some difficulties. Mr. Warden mentioned about this, and also that general statement should be expressed to the community. I mean regularly, that support of astronomers. So instrumentation news about this. That's major lessons of Chelyabinsk event are listed here. First, that the cometer bodies now should be considered as dangerous. Next is that nothing could be done to prevent collision or to mitigate excessive civil defenses. It means that just warning could be done, should be done. And very important lesson is that day sky bodies couldn't be timely detected by any ground and also spaceborne, but in near space facilities, observational facilities. And also that's some organizational result is that the concept of detection necessarily implies two detection modes. Instruments should be designed for two modes. Large distance detection, it means that the bodies of really large bodies, larger than say 50 meters, should be detected beforehand to have possibility to counteract. The warning time means maybe several weeks. And as to the small class bodies, the cometer class body, the Chelyabinsk class body, where we need only the warning, it should be the system which is so quick and efficient to issue this warning timely, not shorter than say 3-4 hours before the collision. So that's why I just introduced some progress in the long distance detection. The new instrument, 1.6 meter aperture telescope with wide field telescope, got first slide, is located near Baikal Lake, near boundary with Mongolia. First images demonstrating the quality were obtained, but still not, the camera still not fully completed to have the wide field for observation full scale. existing facilities for near Earth detection. I mean, smaller instruments are required here. They should be much more numerous than long distance detection. And also it should be mentioned that even amateur facilities could be involved in this activity. It is an important way to attract amateur astronomers to this important task. So we have two networks master of Moscow State University and Dyson, also at the Academy of Sciences, network supported by Roscosmos. But they are not designed, they are not devoted to NEO itself, only some instruments, and sometimes they produce some information. They are in the list of MPC contributors, but not most important. I should stress that 99% of information on NEO comes from instruments or United States and in the program of United States, by United States still. But I think that Russia should participate on some much level, and after completing the camera for the previous instrument and after the completing next project, I think that we will contribute somewhat larger. But that's, we have the project. It is a project of of multi-aperture telescope for NEAD, for near Earth detection, and you will find many details on the poster by Naroenkov. I am also the co-author. I am ready to deliver more specific technical information on this. It's just a quick survey telescope. You see that the field of view is very large, and it's possible to to have survey for only a few hours the whole sky, accessible sky. Next is the spaceborne facility, which just test facility. It is the University Satellite Lomonosov. It was equipped with the camera, small camera, but nevertheless there are movie is not going on, but not a problem. Also, I can explain what was done. It's just an example of the cameras which could be used for space debris, also for near space asteroids. SODA, system of observation of daytime asteroid. I mentioned as a lesson of Chelyabinsk event that we need to have instruments located far from the Earth and to look on the Earth from outside. The idea originally was proposed by United States experts. We use it in full scope now. The idea is to put apparatus which absorb in the conic barrier mode. If we have two apparatus, then we could determine the orbit with accuracy sufficient to have the atmospheric entry point at the accuracy of few kilometers across the orbit and few tens kilometers along the orbit. So, and I argued several times for necessity of worldwide table of consequences, because we should have very quick reaction on the possible, sometimes sudden collision. So we should have table consequences which help us to have very quick and efficient solution. One of the example of the calculation, now we are in the process of preparing the table of consequences and of the possible collisions. This is example just demonstrates that the overpressure, I mean what shock waves propagation, the area of shock waves strongly depends on the angle of the atmospheric entry. This on the right is just a perpendicular atmospheric entry. We see that overpressure zone is a small one, but if the like in Chelyabinsk event, if the very slope is low, then the overpressure region will be high. So any details, please come to me. Some conclusions. International activity is very important. Russia is going in this direction. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Boris. I don't think we have time for questions, but you will be here for the whole week. So at the poster session also, maybe in the evening. Good.
I think it'd be nice if somebody were standing here and helping the new people immediately.
Yeah, I
Could you
think
maybe arrange
that's what I
that?
suggested.
Because I also have no idea where I should click now.
Yeah, probably just stay away with your computer, and then the technical guy will.
Actually, I managed, but okay, still.
Okay,
It's
while
right there.
Detlef is struggling,
No,
let
it's
me
coming.
introduce him.
Yeah,
Our next speaker
it's there,
is
it's there.
Dr.
I have it,
Detlef
I have it, I have
Koschny
it.
from ESA. He's been involved in the Near-Earth object segment of the ESA Space Situational Awareness Program since 2007, and the co-manager with Rudy Yan. And he's also part of ESA delegates of the Space Mission Planning Advisor Group and the steering group of International Asteroid Warning Network. Detlef.
Right. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. So our mission statement in ESA's Near-Earth Object segment, as we call it, is the following. It's to establish and support a European capability for the protection of our critical space and ground infrastructure from threats by potential asteroid impacts. So we tried to summarize what we should be doing in one sentence, and after 6 years of thinking about this, I think we managed to reduce it all to just one sentence. So there we go. This is what we are supposed to do. Luckily, we have some funding also. We had a ESA ministerial meeting on council meeting on ministerial level, that's the official name, last year in December, and they approved for the complete space situational awareness program, they approved 95 million euros until 2020. Now we get about 1/3 because space situational awareness in Europe covers space weather, it covers the topic of looking at space debris, it's called space surveillance and tracking, and near-Earth objects. So we have about 30 million to spend now in 4 years. This is the way we structured our program. Looks very similar to what you've seen before. I think it's quite obvious. So we have somebody who is doing the dirty management work and making sure that the people can actually do their jobs. And we have 3 what we call pillars. An observation pillar. We have something called information provision or information distribution. We have a pillar called mitigation on the right. And then more or less the foundation to everything is what we call ground and data system support. That's just a clumsy name for all these glue activities that you need, you know, people that manage the software testing and all these activities. So let me run through these different pillars and let you know a bit what we achieved over the last 4 years and what we're planning until 2020. So we have a lot of presentations from team members. There's a lot of people here. I try to always link to the relevant paper if you are interested in more details. I'm sure I forgot 2 or 3. I apologize for that. Feel free to raise your hand and complain afterwards, and that gets you all the attention then for your presentation. Ettore Perozzi will give a presentation a bit on our services that we currently provide. So we have something called NEO Coordination Center. Those that were at the last Planetary Defense Conference at Esrin in Italy, they have seen it, hopefully. So we have a group of people there acting as a front desk interface to the outside world and also maintaining this web page. That's what we call the ESA technical web portal for NEOs. So it's not focused really on the public and having fancy pictures and flashy stuff, but it's supposed to provide information. And I'll run you a bit through the different things that we present there. So an enlargement of the menu on the left. Of course, we do have some kind of news and information to grab people's attention. But then some of the main points are, which I visualized here in this slide, is, for example, tools that we offer for downloading, so you can propagate orbits. We have an interface to the NEO population model, which was published last year by Granvik et al. So some of the screenshots that you see here. I want to point you to more details by a talk by Nadi about the impact corridor visualizer, and then we have a poster on the more technical concept. Maybe
more interesting for the people here in the room that actually implement software and implement these systems. Of course, the key element here is what we call the risk list, which takes the results right now from the NEODICE system in Pisa. But one of the important things that we are currently working on in collaboration with Andrea Milani, with the company Space Dice, is that we are moving or copying the system to SRAN so that we can really guarantee a long-term availability of NEODICE. And this goes back to a statement that I read something like 15 years ago in one of the first reports at the United Nations, that the long-term financial security of something like NEODICE has to be established. This is now the case. I'm happy to report, at least until 2020, because then, of course, also we need to get new money. But okay, that's already fine. So this is a screenshot of the risk list. So right now we just take the information from NEODICE and we sort of present it in a slightly different way. NEODICE, as you all know, performs orbit propagation 100 years into the future. And in this list you can see all the objects that have a probability larger than 0 to impact our planet. So part of this migration is basically a thorough recoding of the software, refactoring, and also documentation. And I think it was quite a nice exercise also for the people that actually implement the code to make sure they really know what they're doing. In terms of observations, there will be a talk, no, actually it's a poster by Marco Micheli on our observational activities. We are currently focusing on follow-up observations because that's the assets that we have in Europe. We have our own telescopes, like on the upper right, we have a 1-meter telescope called Optical Ground Station on Tenerife, which we regularly use for asteroid follow-up. We also use that to test survey strategies and to learn how to do surveys. Typically in the morning hours when people want to go to sleep anyway, we run a survey sequence which we can then analyze when people have breakfast, so that's quite nice. And we learned a lot with that already, which will feed into a survey telescope, which I'll present in the next slide. We support national observatories. We have a contract with the Cala Alto team where we have the 80-centimeter Schmidt telescope, which we're using. We support the CLET observatory. You see the image on the lower right there, and Jana will give either a presentation or a poster. I don't remember. Was it a poster? Yeah, okay. So there will be some information there. And we have a testbed telescope, which is this photograph here, where we have this located close to one of our ground stations where we do satellite tracking. It's a 56-centimeter telescope, which we're using or just getting operational. It has a 2.5 by 2.5 degrees field of view. And the second one will be installed in La Silla in summer. And this is what we use to do some software testing. Now, the major project we're working on right now is called Fly-Eye Telescope or NEO Survey Telescope. This is a 1-meter effective aperture telescope, and it's called Fly-Eye because you see on the upper right, that's one of the optical elements in there. We split the field of view in 16 subfield of views, and in the end, you get a telescope which has 6.7 by 6.7 degrees field of view, so about 45 square degrees in one shot. So we're going back to the good old days when we had photographic Schmidt telescopes. So there is a prototype telescope which you see on the left is available. It's being built by an Italian company which is now called OHB Italy. And you see some of the hardware. So this is the mount. On the left side, that's the secondary cage and what we call the beam splitter, which actually generates these 16 subfield of views. And then basically the way it works, this is the top end of the telescope on the upper left. There are 16 individual cameras mounted there. So you simply take 16 4K by 4K squared sensors, build them 16 times and then mount them there, so you don't have this issue of having this huge CCD mosaics. You do have the issue of focusing and aligning 16 different field of views to the same mirror. So we'll see how that goes. Information dissemination. So what we do in terms of how do we actually distribute any information about close flybys, impact, threats. There is a dedicated talk actually by myself now in session 7. We had workshops with emergency response agencies in Europe where we collected information. We asked them, what do you actually need? To me, the most important message was in previous workshops here also, we were always saying, yeah, we should tell them to evacuate or something. No, we shouldn't. This was my main conclusion there. We tell them what the effects are, and then they know much better than us what they have to do. So that was my main message, but I'll talk about that in a separate presentation. What we did there is we have a document which we call NEO Information Plan, which should really be called Information Distribution or Dissemination Plan, which has been agreed by our official delegates to our program. So it's really sanctioned by and endorsed by our political representatives. It describes which information should be distributed when and to whom. And the good news is, of course, it's completely in line with what we discussed at I1 and SMPAG, so the same thresholds, the same criteria are in there. We are currently coming up with something like you see a screenshot on the right. This also comes from one of the participants here at the conference. We prepared what we call a close flyby information sheet. This is the kind of information contents is then agreed with what these people from the emergency response agencies want to know. Okay, where do we go? I said the second testbed telescope will go to La Silla. We have an agreement with ESO in place. The first fly-eye telescope, we are currently studying potential sites. The most likely site is in Sicily in Italy, and then also the second telescope will be somewhere in Chile. In terms of mitigation support, you saw this diagram before. It's nice to see it again and again. We are fully supporting I1 and SMPAG, so all our observational activities, NEODICE, I see as part of I1. And as you heard before, the ESA delegation is currently chairing SMPAG with Gerhard being the delegation leader. We are also looking right now into the fireball camera system, smaller ends. We are discussing with CTBTO to use infrasound data for getting information on fireballs. In terms of space-based activities, well, you heard the presentation by our Director General in the morning. He's really still trying to get ESA or Europe involved in this asteroid deflection mitigation mission. What we are doing in parallel is we are learning how to use space-based telescopes. So I have a little contract where we take an image every hour right now with the LISA Pathfinder star trackers. It's in one of the Lagrange points. We get those down and Marco is measuring the images, and we are just in the process of understanding how to get a station code for a spacecraft. And then in the long run, the idea is to also have a camera like the one on the right. That's a breadboard for a space-based camera that would look back onto the atmosphere and detect fireballs there. So in summary, where we want to be in 2020, we want to have NEODICE really absolutely secured in terms of funding and operations, integrated into the ESA system. We want to have both of our testbed telescopes operating. The FlyEye number 1 should be working by then. That should actually happen next year. And what we don't have right now, there's no backup anymore. There used to be. We had a second NEODICE system in Spain that disappeared, so we want to get back to a situation like that. And we continue establishing international protocols for impact threat warning response. Well, and I discussed the asteroid mission. Ian Carnelli has a paper on that later. Well, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Detlef. Very interesting and comprehensive presentation, but unfortunately time is just running out, so please just grab him during lunch if you have questions. And then with that, we would like to bring our last speaker before lunch, who is Professor Makoto Yoshikawa from JAXA. He's going to talk about the planetary defense activity in Japan. Professor Yoshikawa is associate professor specialized in orbital dynamics and ICS in Japan. He was project manager of Hayabusa 1 and now the mission manager of Hayabusa 2. And he's an inaugural member of Japan Space Guard Association Board of Directors, and he's still actively involved, and everyone knows he's central engine of this local organizing committee. Yoshikawa-san.
Okay, thank you, Hajime. Okay, since we are running out of time in this morning session, and maybe you are hungry, I make my talk short. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the planetary defense activity in Japan. Okay, so this is a starting point. In Japan, Space Guard activity started in 1990s. At first, there are small groups such as Asteroid Capture Study Group or Asteroid Collision Study Group. And then Japan Space Guard Association was established in 1996. And this one, Professor Isobe, he is a key person. He was a key person. And he's a first director of Japan Space Guard Association. But unfortunately, he passed away in 2006. And after, we constructed a Bisei Space Guard Center in Okayama Prefecture. And here, the observation of NEO started. And this facility was owned by JSF, Japan Space Forum. But from last month, from this April, the owner of Bisei Space Center had changed to JAXA. So this is current status. And this slide, actually this is the same slide that Professor Tsuneta showed in this morning in his keynote speech. So we have two contributions. One is the asteroid mission, Hayabusa and Hayabusa 2, and the other one is observation. So I quickly talk about these things a little bit in detail. So this shows the Japan's asteroid explorations. Starting point is 1985, and we had Hayabusa mission, and then now we are operating Hayabusa 2. So this is a Itokawa S-type asteroid, and the target of Hayabusa 2 is Ryugu. It is a C-type asteroid, and both are near Earth object. And now we are discussing next mission, and one of the candidates is Phaeton flyby mission, as already talked by Professor Tsuneta. Okay, so the purpose of these missions are, of course, one is to develop a new technology for the asteroid simultaneous mission, and the other one is science. But of course, these missions are quite important for the planetary defense. Okay, and this shows the history of Hayabusa and Hayabusa 2, but this is rather complicated, so I skip this. And anyway, the mission scenario is like this. This is for Hayabusa. It was launched 2003 and arrived at Itokawa 2005. And it made 2 touchdowns. First one was failure, but second one is okay. But after that, we had many serious troubles, but it came back to the Earth 2010. The result of Hayabusa, I will talk tomorrow. And also now this shows the mission scenario of Hayabusa 2. It is quite similar to Hayabusa 1, but we have a new challenge that is to create a small crater on the surface of Ryugu. And for Hayabusa 2, I think on Wednesday, Professor Tsuda, he's a project manager of Hayabusa 2, will talk here. Anyway, as I said before, these two objects are near Earth asteroid like this. This shows the orbit of Itokawa, this green one, and this yellow one is orbit of Ryugu. So both orbit come close to the orbit of the Earth. So, and now we know the Itokawa in detail like this. So this is a photo of Itokawa, a very strange looking asteroid. The size is just 500 meters. And we see lots of boulders on the surface, and not craters. And we analyzed this data, and we found out the structure of Itokawa is a labropile, and the next target is Ryugu. And currently, we just know something like this, just a spherical shape. But next year, Hayabusa 2 will arrive at Ryugu. Then we will know here what is Ryugu. And another interesting thing for Hayabusa 2 mission is it has an impactor. It has small impactor like this, and using this, we will create a small crater on the surface. It is very small. Maybe the size of crater will be just a few meters in diameter. And such experiment will be observed by this separate deployable camera. So this is a very challenging mission. And however, the impactor is very small, so we cannot change the orbit of Ryugu. But before considering this small impactor, actually we considered another other mission. I mean, in the initial proposal of Hayabusa 2, we considered Hayabusa 2 spacecraft and another spacecraft impactor. So this is quite similar to the concept of AIDA or Don Quixote. But after we proposed this, there was the budget problem, so we must make our impactor very small. Okay, so next one is observation. So now here I only talk about the APAON, Asia Pacific Asteroid Observation Network. In 2013, JAXA proposed APAON to enhance the observation of NEO in Asia Pacific region. And now members are about 30 from 11 regions. So of course the purpose is to contribute to NEO problem in the world, but there are many other purposes. Please look at this chart. So you can see there are lots of observatories in United States, Hawaii, and Europe. But in this region, Asia region, the number of observatories not so much, not so many. So we think it is better to make a kind of network to observe asteroids. So that's why JAXA proposed APAON. And this shows the current member. There are many Asian countries like this. And this is a name of, this is observatories or institutes like this. Okay, so for example, in Japan, there are lots of telescopes. Okay, please ignore the Japanese language. Just see the number. This number shows the size of telescope in Japan. So we have a lot of 1 meter class telescopes inside Japan. So we thought this is good to use for the observation of asteroid. So that's why we proposed this asteroid network, asteroid observation network. And this year, in February, we had a Space Guard Symposium. This is a domestic symposium in Japan. And in this symposium, there are several presentations related to APAON. This is from Korea, Dr. Hong-Kyu Moon's presentation. And this is from China, Xiaobin Wang, Dr. Xiaobin Wang presentation. And this is from Indonesia. And actually, this is Thai observatories. I visited here last February. So like this, in Asian region, we have a very good potential to observe asteroids or NEO. Okay, and this is the activity in Japan. We have many activities like this. Okay, to summarize, so in Japan, we have organization, Japan Space Data Association, and we have Visay Space Center, and now we are working for the APAON network. And of course, we have Hayabusa and Hayabusa 2. So Japan can contribute to NEO issues. Okay, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Makoto. Okay, are there any questions and comments? Just take a few. If that's okay, then probably I will give the floor to Makoto for the announcement from the LLC.
Okay, so now as a LLC, at first, thank you very much for coming here, and welcome to Japan. And I hope you will enjoy this meeting and your stay in Japan. Okay, so a quick announcement. Yes, this is a map of here. Maybe you know quite well now.